But before we get into all of that, we're going to be talking about a video that has surfaced recently. It's a clip from a podcast. We thought that we'd do a bit of a response video. These are kind of popular people's responses. And we felt it was necessary as one of the voices of functional fitness, CrossFit, strength and conditioning in the industry. We thought it would be appropriate that we shed some light on this particular thing. So, give you guys some context what I'm talking about. Joe Rogan had a podcast recently with a guy called Zahabi. Zahabi is George St. Pierre's coach. If you know George St. Pierre, he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, mixed martial artists of all time. And Zahabi is, I think he's some kind of Arabic, I think. Might be Lebanese. Or anyway, he's a great coach. Put it that way. He's a great coach when it comes to MMA. Now, I think this is the problem with guys like him, right? He's so well respected at what he does. He's proven such great results. But he then, when people say stay in your lane, this is one of those moments, right? So he's on Joe Rogan's podcast and they're talking for a long time. How they started the show was not talking about MMA, but instead talking about strength and conditioning. And it kind of went down that road for a while. And unfortunately, for us, just doesn't really know what he's talking about. He's read one or two books from certain people, and he hasn't really expanded his repertoire of knowledge. He definitely hasn't had the same level of experience of coaching people in strength and conditioning that we have. He definitely hasn't interviewed the same level of people that we have in strength and conditioning. So that is the reason we feel like we're justified to comment on this and give reasoning to why some of the stuff he says is right. Obviously, the stuff does get taken out of context, but ultimately what he's talking about is just pretty stupid. Put it this way, if you guys have heard of Kelly Starrett, if you know about Kelly Starrett, he was very popular for a long time in CrossFit, and essentially a lot of his things got debunked, or they were like, look, these are like half-truths, they're incomplete, they're only one part of the picture of human movement. This guy is basically on Kelly Starrett's nuts. Like this is all he cares about, and he's just kind of living in the past a little bit. He's where we were like 5 years ago, 7 years ago with Kelly stuff. Anyway, so this is a little bit of the video that I'm just going to play. If you guys want to find the whole video yourself, obviously it's like a 3-hour podcast, but this particular thing that we're going to have a response to is where he specifically comments on CrossFit. So it's called Joe Rogan and Zahabi. Zahabi is spelled Zahabi. Zahabi. And it says, Joe Rogan and Zahabi, CrossFit's problem. So this is just a little clip from it.
What can you do but rest? You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Rafa Mendes. Do you think Rafa Mendes, arguably the greatest pound for pound, one of the greatest pound for pound jiu-jitsu guys in the world, do you think he's got a great CrossFit workout that he's really mastered, he's really good at? Do you think he has a great back squat? Do you think he's a great deadlifter?
Doesn't look like it.
No, he doesn't. Believe me. You think Gordon Ryan? He's a great Olympic lifter? No, they're always going to be at an amateur level in the fitness world. Why? Because if they were experts, they would have taken so much from their jiu-jitsu. Like, look at George. He does gymnastics. Okay, and I'm the one I twisted his arm a little to put him in gymnastics.
Why?
Because I thought it would give him tremendous benefit because of the amount of, first of all, they use a lot of body weight, so it doesn't cost us anything neurologically. Body weight exercises are very easy to recover from. Body weight exercises are very easy on the nervous system. They use leverage instead of weights. Plus.
Okay, so it just goes on like that. It's just about 6 minutes, that video. So I don't want to play the whole thing because you'll probably run someone over with your car in anger.
He does shred CrossFit a bit on the bits that you haven't played yet.
Yeah, I sort of played a more mild part of it, but you can hear by the kind of voice he is and the kind of position he's taking and that sort of thing. So I wrote a few things down that he talked about, which was interesting, and definitely for us in the future, please stay in your lane. So first thing you mentioned was the beep test. He's like, I use the beep test for conditioning as a conditioning tool because it's easy and it doesn't hurt. Okay, so first of all, if you're doing something that's easy and it doesn't hurt, that's great. But I mean, you can find anything that's easy and doesn't hurt. You can spin on the air bike, you can go for a jog, you can, do some breathing and meditation. If you're doing conditioning, what is the goal of the conditioning, right? If you're trying to get fitter and you're just doing the beep test, and then you're saying it doesn't hurt and it's easy to recover from, well, you're probably not getting a lot of good conditioning work in, or you're probably just going for a jog. The beep test is a test. It's a test of fitness. It's not an actual structured tool to get you fitter. You can't just run the beep test every single day to improve at the beep test. I mean, you could to a certain extent, but once you kind of tap out, you can't just keep going back and go, today I'm going to beat it. ask the best rowers in the world, right? Rowing's a good example. They're not going to keep rowing 2Ks back to back to back every single day to get better at the 2K. The 2K is a test, right? They do intervals, they do heart rate work, they do periodization, they do all that stuff. So the fact that he starts by saying like the beep, like he uses the beep test as like part of his like weekly, daily conditioning is like fucking stupid. He also said Tabata gets you really sore.
Well, he had a particular type. He's like, I would never do Tabata with kettlebell swings.
Yeah.
But it would be sweet, like jumping over
A hurdle. So I think what he was trying to say is I suck at kettlebell swings and they make me really sore, so I'm not going to do them. But I do a lot of rebounding because I do a lot of kickboxing, a lot of boxing, a lot of drilling where they do a lot of footwork. And so he has really good resilience in his calves, right? But he has really low resilience in his hips. That's called a weakness, right? So if you find you get really sore from that in your hips, you should probably train it more. Don't go balls to the wall to the point you can't walk the next day, but do some progression, do some periodization, building up. If you have a deficit in something and it makes you really sore, it's probably a good sign you need to work on it, right? But this guy sees it as like, oh no, if you do that, it's going to be a detriment to your other training, which I understand, but that would just be like you hammering it way too hard, which is essentially what he must be doing. Other thing that he wrote down as well, he was kind of comparing CrossFit to Jiu-Jitsu, which was a bit strange. Conditioning is just supplemental to something like Jiu-Jitsu. So I don't know why he was making that comparison, like you had to pick one or the other, or it's stupid to do CrossFit while you do Jiu-Jitsu or MMA.
Yeah, he was almost like, you're never going to get good at it because you're just doing it part-time. That's fine.
Because it's a tool
you don't have
to make you fitter.
You don't have to get that good at it.
Yeah.
No one's like, oh, if you're going to start doing this CrossFit training, like, we better be ticking off Matt Fraser's time here, like at some point. Otherwise, there's no point even getting going. It's not really like that. You can just start and get everything out of it that you can, and you don't necessarily have to become extremely good at everything.
Yeah,
Just do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly coming from a guy that's never done CrossFit before. I mean, the problem is they just watch videos on the internet of people doing it, and they're like, oh fuck, okay, it's stupid. I would never do that. It's just inexperience, and I just don't like when people that are in such a position, like such a guru sort of position, they speak so openly about, there's such broad sweeping generalizations of 2 videos that they've watched. He did go and say, oh, but the CrossFit Games champions, they would never do that. Like they would build up slowly and they would have progression and then they would peak at the right times. Who's to saying that gyms like us aren't doing that? Like because he doesn't know, right? If he came to our gym, we could change his mind in one day. I hope that he sees a video like this so he can educate himself and not ruin something that is potentially really good. There's a lot of good that's come out of CrossFit style training, a lot of data, a lot of knowledge, a lot of different ways of doing things. And if you just close yourself off to those sort of things and say it's all bad, then you're limiting your athletes that you're coaching. And then he goes on to say, so I forced him into gymnastics. You guys heard it? Gymnastics is a part of CrossFit. Like who says that we don't do strict muscle ups, we don't do ring holds, we don't do L-sits, we don't do planks. So that was, again, him just not knowing what he's talking about. And then he was also saying that bodyweight strength exercises have really, really low impact on the nervous system, which essentially isn't true. We've talked about this before, but it's all relative, right? The body only knows stress. The body only knows force, right? And so obviously walking out with 300 kilos on your back is like insane force. And yes, it's going to drain the nervous system. But if you do, 10 sets of max strict handstand push-ups, that's extreme force through the shoulders, right? You are going to be taxed the next day. You can't recover from that. It's not easy to recover from. I don't know why he's saying it's easy to recover from. Is he doing 5 sets of 1 push-ups? Is he doing bodyweight squats? Maybe.
Yeah,
They're probably easy.
There's nothing like specially unique to the body about if you say you go do some back squats with like 60 kilos on your back, right? You do 10. Or you just do 10 pistols. It's probably going to be really similar force on the muscles in there. It's not like the muscles are like, this one was bodyweight. So like 0 soreness.
Yeah, I didn't feel the cold steel on my back, so easy recovery.
Yeah, there's nothing like especially unique. Your body doesn't even know if it's body weight or if it's not.
Yeah. I would just I would just say that in situations like that, if he believes that bodyweight exercises are easy to recover from, and so he's flogging his athletes with bodyweight exercises,
it's probably because he's done them for his whole life, so they're easy for him to recover from.
Or he just hasn't done progressions that are hard enough to stress the body. He probably hasn't done like lever training or like, I don't know, maybe planche training or anything like that.
Doing a lot of push-ups and pull-ups, and he can probably already do heaps of that.
That's right, yeah. And that would just be the same as like doing 40 kilo deadlifts or 60 kilo back squats, or 10 kilo shoulder to overhead. It's just all relative force to the body, and that's a core principle that we understand in exercise science and the body that he simply is just completely misguided on. And as a result, he's probably really damaging some of his young athletes, their potential. I'm sure he's a great MMA coach, but his athletes are probably missing out heaps on strength and conditioning benefits. So, I don't know. Maybe that's why when he goes, hey, George, go do gymnastics and go do it with someone else, he doesn't want to be a part of it because he has no idea what he's doing. But anyway, we thought we'd leave it there. Maybe shed some light on it. Maybe if you have people that have seen that and heard that podcast, obviously it's a huge podcast. A lot of people listen to it. Maybe you need to send this to them. We're going to put it on YouTube. We'll slice it up just this little section so that you can send it to them. Anyway,